Hello, Elijah here. In this video, I'm going to dig into the GitHub Copilot CLI tool and kick the tires. As a high-level overview, this tool provides the power of Copilot, but laser-focused to help you generate terminal commands. And I'll even try to explain them to you too, which is pretty cool. So let's get started. Okay, well, before we really get started, it's important to know that at the time of this recording, GitHub Copilot CLI is still in technical preview. Feel free to sign up on the waiting list. So let's install it from the terminal. We'll use npm and install it globally. Then you'll need to authenticate with GitHub, which will generate an 8-character code that you'll need to enter into the URL listed. So I'll kick up a browser with the URL, and then go back and copy the code into my clipboard, and then I'll flip back and paste that into the browser. Then I'll continue, navigate down a bit, and click the Authorize button. Now when I navigate back to the terminal, it'll recognize that I'm authorized, and we're all good. Before moving on to using the tool, let's open our zhrc file, and we'll add an eval to the bottom of our config. That will set up aliases for the GitHub Copilot CLI. Once we save and source our config, we'll be ready to start kicking the tires. Let's first start with the git command. Okay, so my last commit in this branch has a typo in it. Let's see what the GitHub Copilot CLI can do to help us. With the git ? Command, I'll ask it, how do I update the message of my last commit? Then GitHub Copilot will start to think about it, propose a command, and then work on a detailed explanation about what it suggested. At that point, you can run the command that it suggested, decide to revise it, or cancel out completely. In this case, I'll run the command. Then it'll ask to make sure that's what I meant, and yes, it is. And here I can update the misspelled word and apply my changes. Wonderful. Oh, well, I just realized that the commit is on the main branch, and I really meant it for it to be on a feature branch. Well, let's ask GitHub Copilot to help us. Hello, Git. I accidentally committed to main, but it needs to be in a branch. And wham, Copilot offers a suggestion. And here's a detailed explanation of what it's trying to do. But wait, that isn't exactly what I want. I don't want a branch called new-feature. This is where the revise query option comes in handy. Here I'll add that the branch is feature awesome, and it'll update the commands to use the new awesome branch name. Yay. Okay, so I'll run those commands and say yes, and rock on. Okay, so I'm really liking this awesome feature branch, so I'll push it up to my origin. Okay, done with that, moving back onto main. But now let's say I want to remove that awesome branch, both locally and from my origin. Do I know how to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Well, let's ask Copilot and give it a try. Git, how to delete branch locally and on origin. And here you'll see some placeholder text. Here's another great place to revise the query, and we'll say, for the feature awesome branch. And we'll go ahead and run that. Say yes, and boom. So in this case, it did delete the remote branch, but I did get an error that my local branch was not fully merged, and it prompted me to use the -D flag to actually delete it. Now, Copilot didn't know this, but it's okay. We need to be aware and careful with what we're doing. Okay, so let's switch to the gh command and have Copilot help us with that. We'll ask gh to list PRs for this repo. And the explanation is pretty good. However, let's tweak it slightly to only list PRs that were created by me. Now, I could have looked up the documentation for the gh command, but this is a cool way I could just ask the tool to figure it out for me. And a nice thing is it also teaches me the commands and flags while I'm using it. And I'll go ahead and run the command, and boom, there are my PRs. Okay, let's try something a bit more involved and complicated. And I'll ask GH, how do I list my public gists and pipe those through FZF with a preview of each gist? And it'll think about it, and then boom. And then it'll describe what's going on. Pretty good. But I don't want to just have a preview. I want more. But seriously, I want to edit the gist that's selected. And boom, there it is. That's actually not what I would have done personally, but that's actually a great point. This tool helps you learn ways to solve problems that you may or may not have thought of before. Okay, let's make one more last tweak. We'll put the preview on the bottom since we are zoomed in pretty far. All right then. Okay, so let's give this a try. And bam, here are my public gists with a preview at the bottom, and I can move around and search. And once I select one, it'll open up NeoVim. That's pretty cool too. And I'll go ahead and make a change at the bottom, save and quit, and get out of here. And if we go check out my gist, you can see my awesome comment. So cool. Okay, so let's look at another command that Copilot provides. But first, please consider booping the like button if you found this video helpful. It really does help the channel. Thanks. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to those who are members of the channel and those who have given super thanks over the past few months. It's very much appreciated, so thank you. Oh, and if you too want to join, there's a join button below that you can click to get more information. Okay, so back to the regular programming. All right, so we looked at the Git helper and the GH helper, but there's one more. If you just want some general help from the command line, you could type question mark, question mark. For example, let's ask list global npm packages, and it'll generate a command for us with an explanation, just as it has been doing with Git and GH commands. And I'll run it, and it'll list out my global modules. Okay, let's try another one, but a little more complicated. How about list top-level folders from the .config folder? And okay, cool, that looks good. But let's also ask only show the name. And now it'll update for us. And yeah, that looks like it should work. So let's give it a try. And yep, do it please. And then wham, here's a list of folder names. Okay, one last thing before we go. Now, GitHub Copilot CLI is cool and all, but sometimes you just want to do that fancy stuff without going through the tool again. Well, you are in luck. The final commands are actually recorded in your history, so you can navigate through your history one by one, or you can manually peek at your history. I'll look at the last 10 entries. Or you can Control R and search back through your history for these Copilot goodies. One of the cool things about GitHub Copilot CLI is that it can work in any terminal emulator. You aren't tied to one particular tool to use it. I've had fun playing with it, and I hope you could get access to it soon. Alright then, I hope you found this video helpful as we dug into the GitHub Copilot CLI. It was definitely a fun way to play in the terminal and try out some new things. Of course, you should probably be careful with the output of GitHub Copilot CLI and make sure you understand what's going on before you run. However, as I mentioned before, sometimes the output, I learned something new. That's a different way I wouldn't have thought of doing it. So that's a really neat side effect that I wasn't expecting. Anyway, I hope you could try it out and have some fun too. Until next time, keep learning.